If at all possible, you can let us know what you do as well. Hi, Tony. Thank you for joining us from Chicago. Hi, Sundar. Thank you for joining us from Chennai. Okay, we have Sarvjit from India. There's someone joining us from London. Okay, a lot of pings coming in. Great.
Excellent.
Wow, that's amazing, amazing. We're also live on LinkedIn and YouTube. So we have more participants joining us from different parts of the world, I'm sure. As we can see here, there's someone from it might take a long time to read all of these. Okay, we have Rashmi from US, Sham from Hyderabad, Mary from Chennai, Mithun from Dubai, Terence from Virginia, Sandra from
Wow.
Southern CA, Manikantan from Pune, Fawad from Abu Dhabi. Wow, amazing. Balaji from New York, Calvin from Ohio, Karthik from Coimbatore. Amazing. Great. Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so it's super exciting to have such a lively bunch of audience here. Let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Ananya. I would be hosting the session on behalf of Simply Learn. Over the next 3 hours exactly, you're going to not just hear about various project management artifacts, but actually build them along with an amazing expert that we have here. So please do stay tuned because we'll be working through a lot of exercises together. Okay, so here are three quick rules to keep in mind throughout the session. First, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A box and not the chat box. You can see the number of chat pings that keep coming here, so we might not be able to keep track of all the messages that come here. So please, if you have any question that you want the expert to answer, please use the Q&A box effectively. Second, the chat is there. Feel free to use it to share your thoughts, your reactions, and answers to the exercises and the polls that we'll be launching. But just keep it relevant to what we are discussing. If we keep getting a lot of pings, we would have to disable the visibility to everyone in the audience as it might affect their workshop experience. So once again, let me tell you to use the Q&A box as much as possible. And third, at the very end of the session, we'll drop a poll. Type your full name into it if you want your attendance certificate. Please do not miss that as we will not be able to take any manual entries. And if your name is not in the poll, we won't be able to provide the certificate or the recording of the workshop. Okay, right. So just curious to know, has anyone here attended a Simply Learn webinar before? We have hundreds of people here, so we'd love to know if anyone is joining here for the first time. If it's first time, you can just type out first time. If you've attended before, you can say that yeah, you can type out yes. Okay, we have Sandra who's attended some webinar 2 weeks ago. Thank you for being here again. But wow, okay, great. Most of you are saying it's your first time. Okay, so allow me to quickly brief about Simply Learn and what we do. We help people build relevant job ready skills. It's as simple as that. In this journey, we have helped more than 50 million people across 150 plus countries level up their careers, and we work with some of the world's top universities and companies to make that happen. So, like I said, we have an ecosystem of great partnerships. We built a curriculum in collaboration with highly ranked institutions that you can see here, and as well as global tech giants like Google, IBM, AWS, and Microsoft. These partnerships really shape what we teach and how we teach it, which means when you learn with us, you're learning what the industry expects from you right now. Um, Right. So moving on, a couple of numbers like worth calling out here. Learners who come through our program see an average 50% salary increase. Our graduate rate sits at 80%, which is well above industry average, and we are consistently rated 4.8 on 5 by our learners. What really drives that? Well, it's the curriculum that is built alongside top universities and companies, like I've mentioned. Sessions are taught live by people who are actively working in these fields, and you work through real case studies and projects and not just theory. And you have a cohort manager available to support you throughout the program. Okay, so let me get to the most exciting part of the workshop, which is introducing the person who is going to be leading the workshop today. Tim, Tim Jerome is the expert that we have today, and I'm very, very glad and honored to welcome him. Tim has spent decades in this space, first as a consulting project manager working with Fortune 100 and Fortune 50 companies, and then as a trainer and mentor helping project managers around the world build their skills and earn their PMP credentials. Between 2004 and 2020 alone, he has taught over 15,000 students, and he's not just focused on exam prep. His approach is about helping people apply these skills in their day-to-day work. Tim, over to you for a quick hello before we kick off, and then we'll get into the content.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for that great introduction. Welcome, everyone. I have a passion about business and project management. I have an MBA, but I also have my PMP certification back from 2003. And so in 2004, I started working inside of my corporation to help people prepare. And then it just sort of grew. And in 2012, I was doing it full time. And so I understand the underpinnings, but that's not the exciting part. I've been doing research along the way. I'm also a research analyst, a lecturer at a university, as well as an adjunct professor. So I'm engaging in business over here. I'm engaging in the real project work over here, and I'm also engaging in the research and where project management's going for you guys who are entering the workforce and are learning these new skills, especially in these uncertain times. These are very exciting times, and many people are interested in what we're talking about today. I'm really happy to be here. I'm happy that you find this interesting. We're going to have a great conversation. I think you're on mute.
Oh, my bad. Thank you, Tim, for the perfect introduction. It's an absolute pleasure to do this with you. Before we dive in, let's do a quick pulse check with the audience. We want to get a sense of who's in the room today. So I'm going to launch a poll to understand all of you better. Just tell us where you are in your PM journey currently. Are you starting out just, or are you managing projects a little, informally at a beginner level? Or are you preparing for the PMP exam already, or are you already certified and here to just sharpen things up? So take a second and vote. We will see the result come in live in just a few seconds. Okay. Okay, great. We have already like about 100 people who have voted. We hope to get more responses coming in. It seems like we have a good mix of audiences here, but a lot of you are preparing for the PMP certification, which is amazing. Tim, I think it's good to know good to know our audiences better as you work through the material.
Oh,
Okay, so
yeah.
I'm just going to have the poll live for 5 more seconds,
OPMP.
and I will end it just about now. Great. Okay, so I've also shared the results so everyone can see the,
Oh,
great mix
wow.
of audiences that we have
Almost,
here.
almost
Yeah,
half
yeah,
of you are
almost.
preparing for your certification. That's neat. That's neat.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. So great. We will take you through the game plan for today. So here's what we're going to work through. There are eight segments covering the full project management lifecycle from initiation all the way through closeout. There's also a sneak peek into the project management with GenAI program. So we will wrap up with a program deep dive and a live Q&A with Tim. So after each segment or most of the segments, there is also a learning check, a quick exercise tied to a particular scenario. So you will be applying everything that you learn here in right in the session in context. So before we dive in, just one more thing. Just because you're here today, you're getting exclusive access to three resources: a project management interview Q&A guide, a PMP exam prep guide, and a playbook for building the perfect project management portfolio. This will be available only during the workshop towards the last segment. There is a lot of great insights and guidelines in store, so please stay tuned till the end and grab your copy. We will not be sharing this later after the workshop ends. So Tim, hope you're ready to kick off. I'll let you take it from here.
Very good. And thank you again. We're going to actually look at what I teach inside of Simplilearn in our PMP preparation. You can imagine, though, we usually use 35 to 40 hours, and we're doing it in 3 hours. Well, that's not all, because this is exactly what I teach also at university in either 8 or 16 weeks. So you can understand we're not going to go into a great level of detail here, but at the same time, it gives you context. And I see someone's talking about Prince 2. PMP and Prince 2 are two different type of certificates, and they're based on the same standard, ISO 21500, 21501, and so forth. So what we're talking about today is relevant to everybody. And I see somebody's mentioning the 8th version, the new version of PMBOK. We may or may not talk about what's happening inside of Project Management Institute and what it means for us. We can talk about that at the end of the course. But today we're talking about just looking at project management at that really high level. Okay, let's move on here. So first of all, before we talk about this, let's set some context, okay? Let's get some definitions in place. Um, we're going to talk about projects, okay? Business is how companies generate revenue and make profit, okay? And that's what they do, right? They create things for us to consume and use, and we pay them, right? Well, you can break businesses into two categories. Number one, operations work, which keeps the business running. And then you have project work, which are timed events. They're unique timed events that create a deliverable and generate value. Okay, that's what we look at. It's unique, never been done before in this manner. It has a specific schedule and it has a deliverable and generates value. Okay, remember that. Now, when I talk about business, I'm talking about that environment that's happening around it. So much of what is happening around it impacts the project. So we have to understand what's happening in that, understand how decisions are made, understand how information is shared, not just in projects, because as a business does this, you can imagine it's going to happen in your projects the same way. Now, in project management, we're looking at a lot of factors. The high level factors are what we call our constraint or limiting factors, scope. What do we want to get done inside of a project? Yes or no, right? This is all we're going to do. That's scope. Time. When are we going to get this scope done? And then cost. Well, this is not only all of the constraints, because in order to figure out time and cost, you have to figure out how many people are going to do this. How long are they going to work? What type of tools and materials and supplies are they going to use? So understanding how scope, time, and cost work together is a basic, but it's just the beginning, okay? Now, you can imagine if you only have a limited time, you're going to have to approach this work inside your project. You're creating something, right? And it has to be created on a certain date or in a certain week or in a certain month. So what you have to do is have a very organized approach. And what we do in this framework is we say we break it up into 5 groups of activities. Number one, initiating. How does the project get approved? Who sets aside the money? Who actually says this is what we want to do? Who makes the decisions? That's the initiating work, right? And then we have the planning work. The planning work sets down what are the activities we're going to do to create the deliverable? What are the activities we're going to do to monitor and control? What are the activities we're going to change? And then we're going to be running, executing, and monitoring, controlling at the same time. We're going to be building the deliverable over here, and over here, we're going to be collecting data and say we're doing a good job or we need to do better. Now, what's funny is monitoring, controlling sometimes says, you know what? We didn't know enough at the beginning of the project and we need better, so we need to make a change. So sometimes monitoring, controlling kicks off another round of planning too. So you can imagine that this project life cycle is not sequential. It's actually planning and executing and monitoring, controlling all the time until monitoring, controlling says, okay, we're done. We met the objective, we created the deliverable, and people are satisfied, and now we can transition the deliverable. Let's step into our first group of activities called initiation. What do we mean by that? First of all, in initiation, if you don't have any need, why spend money and set aside time and people inside of a company to do it? So we have to have a need. Are we solving a problem? Are we trying to create more money? Are we trying to generate more profit? Are we trying to take command of the market that we're participating in? This is a business need. Okay. This is what business spend money on. And this is why corporations have to change. There are tools we use inside of this needs assessment and this analysis. And these tools we have are usually used to create what we call a business case, a case for solving that need. It talks about the problem. It talks about it's going to spend money. Projects always cost. Are we going to get more out of it than we put into it? And that's what we call cost benefit. And then we're going to look at feasibility. Feasibility says, can we even do this? Right? For instance, if we have to take out a loan for this project, we might not be able to take out a loan. So there may not be a business case, right? And then the big deal is a strategic alignment. You don't do a project unless it meets not just the objectives of the project, but it meets the objectives of the organization, corporations. Corporations and organizations don't set aside time, people, and money unless there is a need. That's the beautiful part about project. You're always working on critical work. If we don't do this, we don't get to meet our objectives. You, as a project manager, are in the limelight, and your work is contingent on being critical to meeting the objectives of the corporation. Okay, that's what the business case says. Now, once you have a business case, what do? Well, we create a proposal, right? We say, hey, we have a good idea for creating a project to fulfill that need. We call that discussion and that document a project charter. Now, a project charter says, here's the need, here's what the business case says, here's how we aim to fulfill it with the project work. Now, as a project manager, you may not be participating in this. As a project manager, there may not be a formal project a charter. But when you're pulled in to plan and help execute the project, it's your job to collect this information and create that chartering document because this is the initial understanding of what we're going to create. Okay? What does it have in it? Project objectives. What is the purpose of this project? What is it doing? Is it helping us because we have another pandemic and we're concerned we're going into lockdown? Are we opening up a new branch in our hospital and we need to make sure that we have all the services stable by the time people start using the hospital? What are the purpose and what do we call success? Success is not just I created something. Success is we created something, it has value, and it works. It has functionality. And that's what success criteria looks like. For our project, what does this deliverable do? Well, it fulfills a need, right? Well, how does it fulfill the need? What does it do? And that's where it is. And this is where, in the project charter, you're doing some pre planning, high level scope, not the whole scope. Your key stakeholders, not all the stakeholders yet. What is the money set aside right now to solve this problem? Because corporations are always thinking about money, people, and time, and they want a high level understanding of what this project is. Because this project is just a proposal, it's just a project charter. And they may be looking at 4 or 5 competing project charters to solve the need. And so we're not just looking at the key stakeholders and budget and high level scope, we're also looking at assumptions. What are our guesses? An assumption is a guess. It's a wild estimate that's not based on anything, okay? And we have to use that sometimes. At the same time, we're going to look at limiting factors. We only have this much money. We only have this much time. We can't use research and development organization to help us on this project. Okay, these are limiting factors. And then what's the authority of the project manager? Are we going to be administrative? Are we going to be facilitators? Or are we going to be director level project managers? That's what the project charter says. The function of a project charter is twofold. It announces we have a formal project, right? And number 2, it defines the authority of a project manager. Okay, let's move on. Wow. We still have a lot of people going here. Okay, so we're looking at who? We're looking at people, right? We're actually looking at the idea of who are our primary stakeholders. If you take our classes, you learn that a stakeholder is somebody who impacts the work or is going to be impacted the work, like a user of the deliverable, or even thinks they could be impacted by the work. The primary roles that we're looking at is number 1, project manager, and number 2, product owner. Okay. Project manager is a project role. They manage the project. The formal definition of project manager is they ensure the project meets not just the deliverable, but meets the objective. So they own the plan. They are accountable. They're concerned about the plan and the process. They're going to be managing things like risks and issues and changes. And they're going to be reporting to sponsors. A sponsor is another stakeholder. What is a sponsor? Sponsor provides the money, and they're the primary decision maker. When I say money, it's not just money in an account. It's also money through investing people and physical resources like materials, tools, and supplies. And they also are accountable for how are we going to get this done. Now, how is a big part of scope, but we'll get into scope when we talk about planning. So, what's the difference between a project manager and a product owner? Project manager is focused on the project, right? Product owner over here is a business role. I have a lot of friends who are product owners. Their job titles may be a business owner or a product manager. In manufacturing and construction, we call these people product managers. They take an idea of a new product that they're going to launch in 2 years, and they create the best they can for that idea, like a new type of laptop, and then they create the new laptop, and then they launch and support that laptop. So they're getting into operations. They're not just getting into projects. So as a product owner, I may have a bunch of projects throughout the life of the product, right? As a project manager, I may be working for a product owner who's working with 4 or 5 project managers. So the relationship between project manager and product owners is very tight. And where a project manager looks at sponsors and stakeholders and they are looking for how it gets done, a product owner looks at the customers, the customer experience, the voice of the customer, and they're accountable for what gets done, the life of the product itself, through its creation, its launching into production or the market, its management in the market, and finally when it becomes obsolete or it's no longer generating revenue, right? That's a product owner who may be a project manager or who may have access to multiple project managers. So let's look at a project charter for what we're doing. Your company wants to launch a new client onboarding portal. What do we mean? Well, we're going to bring new clients into our company so they can have a real good experience and learn how to work with us, right? Maybe we're a consulting group. Maybe we're a group who provides services and products to other corporations. So if we're going to name the project objective in a project charter, we're going to create a new client onboarding portal, but we're going to say also because we want the experience to be as fulfilling and valuable for them, so when they're ready, they can be very, very, very satisfied with our services, right? Okay, so that's the project objective. You see, we're not just talking about how and what, we're talking about why. And that's important about a project charter. It's a why document. So in academic research, is the principal investigator, the product owner, and the postdoc, the project manager. Actually, the principal investigator is going to be the sponsor, but yes, they are the product owner. Now, what's strange is who's the project manager? Maybe the principal investigator, the person who owns the grant, is the is the sponsor and also the project manager. So when we talk about sponsor and project manager, we may not talk about job title or people. We may be talking about roles. Okay? Now, let's list 2 assumptions about this client onboarding portal. Let's assume that we're going to make this portal small so that we can figure out that it works the way we want it to early. We want to launch it in production and just use this. So we're going to limit the number of clients in the first 6 months. That's a limiting factor. That's a constraint. An assumption is we assume that we're actually going to use the way we onboard clients normally without a portal. That may change. Notice the difference there. Another assumption is we assume for the first 2 years that we're just going to use our current clients and migrate them over. And then in the next 2 years after that, we're going to bring new clients in. Notice how I'm using assumptions. We have to start somewhere, so we're going to start with guesses, right? On top of that, we want limiting factors because these are going to create what we call boundaries or guardrails for our project, okay? And those are really good to have in a project charter. Now, who should sign the charter? Okay? Sponsor. Now, one of the ways we can think about this is let's take in a university setting with a federal grant, right? The person who owns the grant, the principal investigator, is going to be the sponsor. They're primarily the ones who sign the charter. In fact, we talk about the project charter as the sponsor's document because it's the sponsor's authority that says, yes, this is the project we want. This is the project I've been setting money, time, and people aside for. Okay. You notice I have a cup of coffee here. Yeah, I on these 3 hour courses, I really appreciate having an extra cup of coffee and a little bit of water. It's difficult to talk for 3 hours. Now we're going to step in. Let's say that the project charter is approved. You are now the project manager. Um, it can be. The question is the project charter prepared by the project manager? It can be. If a sponsor has an idea of who they want to make the project charter, they often invite them in. But sometimes they're so busy working on the charter that they haven't identified a project manager. And you can imagine in an informal project, sometimes the project manager is added after the project is approved. So it goes, it's a spectrum type of thing, okay? I would love to say a project manager uh, participates in the development of a charter, but sometimes it just doesn't happen, okay? And we have to be the bridge that says, okay, let's gather all this information up so we can start planning. And that's where we are now. Now, with that money and that decision, we can start planning. Okay, so the big part of planning that you first work on is how and what. Okay, we call this scope. The scope is what? What are we going to have at the end of the project? You need a definition of that. Well, I had it in the charter. Yeah, we had it at a high level. Now we get into the detail planning. Okay. Like for a 3 year project, if you're going to build a data center, probably you're going to spend 6 weeks building a charter. You're going to be spending 7 weeks to build a plan, 7 months to build a plan. Okay. It's not unreasonable to do this. I actually facilitated like what 30 data center uh, transition projects in my consulting experience. So here we go. What are we doing to develop this? Well, first of all, we take that scope And that scope has requirements. What's a requirement? A requirement says this has to have this. If I'm building a box for manufacturing, I'm going to have to say the box has to be black and the box has to be this size in order for it to do this. Now, the box size and the color are the characteristics of the box. We also have to talk about how. We have that how and what as a scope, and then we break down that scope into pieces. Why? Because that's the way the human brain thinks. We think about the box, we think about coloring the box, we think about the material to make for the box. Let's talk about building a new cell tower. Okay? I also worked in telecommunications and cell towers, and we were talking about things like we have to figure out when we're going to do the construction. We're going to have to figure out when we're going to add the radios onto the cell tower, and we're going to have to talk about when. So when you have scope, then you can do schedule. Scope always comes first and then schedule. And then with schedule, we can talk about who's doing the work. Okay? Resources are needed to determine when we can get things done and how long it's going to take. Because some activities are contingent on other activities, right? In order for me to put cable onto a cell tower, I'm going to have to dig trenches and put conduit in there, right? So we're going to have to look at sequence, and that's what scheduling is. And then when we have our schedule and our resources, we can figure out where do we need to spend money. Okay? That's where we're looking at the real budget. We're still planning. We'll talk about let's talk about estimation. I see a question about 3-point estimation, right? Okay. These cost estimation methods are good for looking at schedule and budget and resources. Okay? So don't think about these cost estimation methods only for budget. Okay? I'll talk about 3-point estimation in just a minute. Let's go through the easier ones. Easier ones are going to say top down. An estimation method says, here's what we think the whole thing looks like, and here's the budget for the whole thing. And let's break it down into pieces. Like analogous estimation, right? We've done this type of project 6 different times, and it's always come out between 65,000 and 75,000. So we expect this will be 75,000. That's analogous. And then parametric. Parametric uses a little bit of math, right? And it says, okay, we learned from 10 projects that it takes about 4 weeks to develop a kilometer of road. Okay? Therefore, this project is going to create 10 kilometers, so it's going to take us about 40 weeks. Okay? See how we use the math? It's still top down because it's using work history, but it's using a little bit of analysis. And then we're looking at bottom-up estimate, where we break things down in our scope into things like we're going to dig trenches and we're going to lay out the conduit and pull cable, right? And each one of those will have their duration and costs, and then we add those up. Now, you can assume bottom-up estimation is more accurate. It is, but it's time consuming, and sometimes we don't have time. 3-point estimation says let's look at 3 different estimates and average them out. Like optimistic, what if everything was perfect estimate? Pessimistic, what if everything went wrong estimate? And something in the middle, most likely. If it's neither optimistic or pessimistic, what do we think will happen? And that's where 3-point estimate help really well. And it's really nice when you don't have work history. Now, we're at the same time we're looking at resources, and I think, and this is where we're getting into purchasing, and you're talking about procurement, right? We're going to talk about this in risk and quality. So when I talk about resources, I'm talking about labor, people, materials like nuts and bolts and cabling. I'm talking about tools like shovels and supplies like cases of bottled water, okay? And we're looking at not just how much these are going to cost, but how long they're going to be used, and also when can they be used? Because sometimes we have the perfect schedule, but people are not available and heavy equipment is not available. So we have to do this resource optimization in our planning as well. Okay. Now, okay. So we're talking about our portal, right? Our onboarding portal for our clients. Let's talk about three high level deliverables for the work breakdown structure, and that's our scope. The portal may be we have to have an interface for people to log in. That's a piece. And we call these pieces phases. And then we have a piece which captures their personal data and it saves them in a database that's secure. And then we have to have a way for them to maintain and update that. So we've just created three phases, right? Now, when we're developing that scope, we go down to the next level. Okay. Work packages. A work package is a piece of a phase. You notice I was talking about those high level deliverables as phase. You can break them down too. Like if I'm developing a cell tower, maybe construction is a phase, but in construction, we have to have build a little shed for the radios, and that's one work package in construction. And then we're going to have to do, dig the trenches and lay out the conduit and cabling, and that's another work package under that. And guess what we get to do now? We get to put them all together. And that's what we call the scope baseline, right? Now, what type of cost estimation method would you use? In my experience, the experts that I have who've done this work do top down because they did this all the time, right? I was a part owner for a telecommunications corporation, and we would go out and we'd use like about 15 years of work history together to do these type of works. Now, there's a word here that we need to talk about. So is the WBS equivalent to one project? Yes, Abalash. And that's what we have to remember. Okay? Yeah. Thanks for that. Don't blink. I am going through this very quickly, and I apologize, but you're getting it all in 3 hours. Now, again, is the WBS equivalent to one? Yeah, and the thing is, when you talk about scope and the work breakdown structure, like the phases to the work packages, we use a concept called all and only. This is all the work we're going to do, and this is only the work we're going to do. And we have to have this all and only because we're setting aside people and setting aside money. And we want to make sure it's definitely going to happen. Okay. So in cost estimation, as we're going top down, we're going to have to get more and more accurate as we go down in our levels. And in our schedule, we're no longer working with work packages. We're working with activities, and activities have sequence, and they have duration, and they have resources, and they have costs. And this is where we're able to put together our budget and our resources. Very cool, huh? What's the importance of critical path? So let me talk about this, okay? We're a little bit ahead, so I'm going to spend time on the critical path, okay? So you can think about a critical path as the one path through your project that says if we don't get this right, it's going to delay the entire project. It's the longest path. There are other, see, when we talk about a path, we're talking about sequence of activities. And the critical path says these activities we can't delay. There are other activities that are going along inside them, and they're going to be, they're going to be important or they wouldn't be part of the project, but at the same time, they're not going to last as long. And so we can delay those. And that type of delay is called float. We can actually observe float on some activities that say, okay, that's all right. That's all right. If we don't get that done, we need to get that done by this date, by the time we use up all our float, right? And but on the critical path, we have to say if we delay anything here, because these are the long activities. These are the activities that define the duration of the project from the start to end. Now, what type of activities would sit on the critical path? Well, we were talking about 3 phases on our onboarding portal scenario, right? The phases that create the registration and the login, you can't delay that because if you don't have that, you can't integrate how we collect information and save it in a database in a secure manner. So we can figure out that we can do the database development and also the login at the same time, but that login is the critical component. It's going to be on the critical path. See how we're doing this? Now, does the project manager have to come up with this? No, no, no. In fact, I'm a great advocate. I'm a great advocate of saying, I'm the facilitator. I bring the experts together who say, you have to have this first, and then this, and then this. And while this is going on, we can get these done. But all of these things that are up here that are not so critical, they're going to be okay. Still have to keep an eye on them, but I'm really keeping an eye on the critical path. So what's the importance of the critical path? That's the path of activities, a sequence of activities that if we delay these, it's going to delay the entire project. That's what you want to know about the critical path. It helps you focus and prioritize as a project manager to where you want to actually pay attention. How's that? Yeah, if and again, if you go into introduction to project management courses, or um, if you go into the PMP preparation, we take you through the mechanics of defining and estimating the critical path, which defines the duration of the project. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, Saturday morning, I'm doing pretty well, right? Okay, so we're laying out scope, schedule, and budget and resources, right? And we're building that plan. We can't just talk about that because we really want to have this happen. Okay? We got to think about quality and we have to think about risk. A risk is something that might happen, and if it does, will impact. So we as a project manager are there to ensure that the deliverable meets the objectives. So we're going to have to guide and facilitate the analysis of risk, right? So what do? We identify risks. We prioritize risks because we might have 30 risks. We always want to be working and thinking about the top 3 to 5. So we identify, we prioritize, and then we develop responses. Because if we're ready for a response, it won't surprise us, it won't stall the project, and we can build those responses into our durations and our budgets. And we're making our project and our baselines more accurate. Okay, here's an example of a risk register that you might use. A risk register is a list of risks with prioritization and with a response. You notice on the right-hand side, it's not just mitigation. Mitigation is how are we going to minimize that risk? We might not be able to eliminate it. Transfer is handing it over. You can actually avoid risks too. That's a response. Maybe you change the plan so that risk doesn't have any relevance for our project anymore. And there are some risks that are accepted because they're below threshold. They're below the threshold or the tolerance of the stakeholders. And we say, that's all right. We understand this. Now, getting back to priority, we're going to have to use both probability and impact because impact is huge, probability is low, it's going to be somewhere in the middle. But if impact is huge and probability is high, that's a critical one. And if impact is low and probability is low, that's probably going to be low. So building our probability and impact and generating this score is going to help us establish the prioritization of the risks. Where do I focus my attention on these risks? Now, again, the project manager doesn't do this. They facilitate it and they use the experts to put this together. This is not just done at the beginning of planning. This is started in planning, and you're going to continue to identify, prioritize, and determine responses because in monitoring, controlling, guess what we're going to do? We're going to find that a risk occurs. We hand over the responses to the team, and they say, okay, this is what we're going to do. Now, there's a lot more detail in here, right? There's a lot more detail, but this is basically how you put together a risk register and use it on a project. Okay, we talked about risk. Now, let's get into quality. Quality is doing work correctly. Okay? It's funny because doing work correctly has a lot of definitions. I could go into the formal description and spend 2 hours on just quality itself, right? So what we have to look at are three components in quality plan, right? Quality assurance. Are we following process and procedure, right? Like in hospital projects, are we are we compliant? Are we protecting the healthcare information of our people, right? That go through our hospitals. In manufacturing and production, are we making these things within tolerance, right? Are we making these things within that range of acceptability? That's quality assurance. Is the process working? Quality control, on the other hand, is looking for defects and finding root causes for defects. And this is where continuous improvement comes in, right? Because we want to not just do this work, we want to plan this work. So when we are actually doing the work of executing and monitoring, controlling, we have one way to find defects, find causes of those defects, and also find out, are we doing this work the best way? Because remember, at the beginning of the project, what did we start with? assumptions, and constraints. Constraints are these factors we can't change. Assumptions are guesses, and this is where quality helps us. It helps us refine our guesses and get more accurate. Okay? Think about this whole quality activity as an experience of continuous improvement, right? Collecting lessons learned, going through root causes, finding out exactly what the problem is that's creating these defects and eliminating them, right? And we're also looking at our quality metrics. This is really important. We have requirements in scope, but in quality, we have quality metrics. Think about a quality metric as a requirement. Like we were talking about that box we were building, right? And that box has to have a hole in the top of it so we can reach in the box without opening the lid, right? That's a requirement. What makes that a quality metric is how big does it have to be? Well, it needs to be about 13.5 centimeters, and we can allow a little bit of variation, like plus or minus 1 centimeter. So when we're talking about quality metrics, we're taking a requirement and adding that acceptable variation in. So guess where we're going to keep our quality metrics? That's right, in our requirements list. Now, we're also looking at what type of standards do we have to align with? And we're looking at how are we going to manage quality? It's not just the things we're going to do to find defects and fix them, but can we actually put the correct type of work into the plan at the beginning and then make sure we have all of these things lay out? Are we going to have external audits come in to make sure we're following process? Sometimes we have to, like in manufacturing and also construction, we have to have work safety certificates for all the workers, right? And that has to be part of the audits. Now, the other part of continuous improvement is we're not just fixing process, we're fixing the way people work together, culture. And this is going to be really important when we get into execution because people do tend to work together as a group, but we're not talk about doing this. Would federal or local regulations be part of quality control? That's a good thing. Actually, I would put federal and local regulations as part of quality assurance. Are we following process and procedure? Okay. That's where I would put that. Okay. That are we actually following laws and regulations as part of quality assurance? Now, the next question is what about cost of quality? Yeah, we have to consider that because if we're spending too much money on quality, we have too much audits, right? What's going to happen? We're not going to have budget for the real work. We're going to run out of money quickly. And at the same time, we're not going to have time because all these audits are going to get in the way of creating the deliverable. So cost of quality says we need to invest in quality proactively, things like training and documentation and making sure the team has things done well. If we don't do that, we're going to spend money on bad quality, right? And we want to spend money on good quality instead of bad quality. We want to be more proactive instead of reactive. So cost of quality says we have to look at this and we have to estimate this on all of our projects. Quality and risk are such huge components of managing work, and they are some of the greatest values that a project manager can bring. Oh
Then
yeah,
allow me to
there's
come to you with a question that we have that I found relevant at this point. So this is in the Q&A box. I'm just going to read that out. How does project management help in a BPO or a KPO sort of operation, and especially in quality line of business? Since we are talking about quality management, I thought you could also give your perspective on how project management helps in the quality line of business.
So your organization and corporation may invest a lot in quality themselves, right? And they have a quality organization. Well, that helps me as a project manager because I don't have to do this myself. I can bring in somebody, and they love to do that, both in planning and also in doing the audits. Because when you get into real formal quality, you're not just talking about, Tim's going to add training and make sure the team does things right. We're talking about following things like Six Sigma and ISO 9000, 9001, and ISO 10000. And all of a sudden you have this formal framework. You can imagine it takes time and money, but in some corporations, like imagine making heart monitors, right? You can imagine that they have their own quality to make sure that their defects are almost zero. And so these people come in and help you. And this is why we have to understand the business environment in order to take the best use of the tools around us. But they are such experts and they do this work all the time. So it's pretty easy as you lay out what your work is and what your product is. If you have that right, you can work with these external teams. Sometimes we actually bring people under contract to help us with this too. And this is where procurement comes in. Okay. Yeah, and that's a big thing too. I like your statement about a company maintains its brand. It's a lot of companies are relied upon because of their level of quality. And all of a sudden, if your project doesn't meet the corporate expectations, you can imagine what your career is going to be like. And this is really big. I want to put a plug on one thing, okay? As we move forward in the future in business, one of the big things are sustainability. Sustainability means my organization's going to be around because we're doing great work and we're doing meaningful work. My corporation's going to be around because we're doing meaningful work. And my environment is around because we're doing meaningful work. Now, each one of us individuals have to define meaningful work for ourselves. And we can talk about this here or in other platforms. For example, a brick manufacturing should produce strength and measurements to meet objectives. Exactly. And again, this is where quality comes in from quality assurance. Are we doing the bricks the way we're supposed to? Are we laying the bricks? Are we mixing the concrete? So even in an informal project, when you're doing this in your backyard, you still have to think about quality. Am I mixing that mortar to the best I can do? And can I do better? We forget that this can I do better is so important.
Okay, I see that someone has left a comment about voice not being clear. We will check about that. We have not heard this concern from anyone else, but we will check regarding the audio. Thank you for pointing that out. Tim,
Yeah.
thank you for addressing that question as well. It's just very fascinating to me how, the examples and the use cases that we're talking about here in project management is just so, different in terms of the industries and the domains. So that's just quite interesting. So, yes, I'll move on to the learning check for this segment. And then maybe we can ask our learners if they want a quick break to probably grab some water, stretch their legs, and so on. So yeah, we will do this learning check and then maybe have a quick 5 minute break if everyone's aligned with that. Yes, okay,
So
so
so let's get back to quality and risk, right? So we're building this onboarding portal for our clients, right? We want these clients to log in. We want us to register, and we want to make sure that they have all the documentation and support they need to be a great client and get what they need to get their work done. So a quality metric would say, if I ask for support, I should be able to get support within 5 to 7 minutes. The requirement is I need to be able to push a button and get some type of support, whether it's a bot or whether it's a human being. And that support needs to come back to me within 5 to 7 minutes, right? The requirement is I need some type of a response. That tolerance is 5 to 7 minutes. So putting that requirement and that tolerance together is our quality metric. Now, risks. We might have a client who misunderstands the instructions and actually partially creates their login, and they miss a couple things and they can't log in again. So if that happens, we need to be prepared for that, to work with them, either with a set of instructions. We hand over those instructions, and then we actually say, if you need more help, let's contact and work with you directly, human to human. Okay. So that's a risk. It's a risk with response. And then we're going to have to prioritize those. Like a user accepting a broken login screen. Is this a QA failure or a QC? Okay. A broken login screen could be a defect. It could be, but we need to say, yep, quality control says it's a defect. At the same time, we have to say, was it a defect in creating that login? Was it a defect in actually leading the person through the login? And what was it? So quality assurance and quality control are looking for defects, quality control, plus looking for the root cause and finding what step in the process it was. So a lot of times quality assurance and quality control work hand in hand. Yeah, technical glitch. It is a QC failure, yeah. Give a specific example, like a data center project and requirements by stakeholders and how you implemented their requirements. Yeah, and again, Shaheen, it's very difficult to lay these items out in such a way that it meets the needs of hundreds of people. At the same time, it actually creates the whole landscape. And I apologize in advance. I'll take that under consideration, though. And this is the big detail. And what Shaheen is talking about is, we're getting into all of this quality and risk. It's driven by these initial understanding of the objectives, where we're looking at the scope, and we're looking at the scope in such a way we understand the schedule and the resources and the budget. And with that, we're building the quality and risk. So even though we're doing these all at the same time, they compound on each other. And this compounding is talking about tying things together. And this is a big part of what project managers do. So for first skills, should beginners focus? I'm going to take that question at a very high level. There are three sets of skills that you're going to look at, and then we can go on a break here, okay? The first skill is understanding your business, okay? You have to have something what we call business acumen, an understanding of how business works, what your business does, and how they go about doing it. Because they have policies and laws and regulations, but they also have culture and politics, right? Now, when we talk about culture and politics, all of a sudden we're talking about people. So you're talking about people skills, emotional intelligence, empathy, the ability to influence and motivate individuals and groups. That's another set of skills. And finally, the process skills, learning about scope, learning about schedule. The project management is a comprehensive thing. It's like a mini MBA. Learning to be a project manager is just like a mini MBA. Okay? You know what? You're looking at this. I like your data center. I have another way to look at data centers, and maybe when we get back, we'll actually look at how to put together the scope and schedule of a data center, okay? And I think we'll use that for the first 5 or 10 minutes after we get back from break. How's that? We'll
Sounds
work on
great to
that.
me too. Yeah. Okay, so if everyone's aligned, then we will break for exactly 5 minutes. Yes, so please go grab some water and maybe refill your coffee, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. Okay. Guys, I hope everyone is back. I just added this timer to have like a reference for everyone here. Just give us a thumbs up if everyone's back and ready to get started. A quick show of hands will be great. Okay, perfect. Amazing. Amazing. Glad to know that, like, almost 1.5 hours into the session and we still have the same high energy and engagement, which is amazing. So before I hand it over to the Tim, I have a couple of quick points. First is that I see that a lot of people have shared their email ID in the chat and in the Q&A box as well. Please rest assured that we don't require your email ID currently. If you require an attendance certificate or the deck or the recording of this workshop, we will be launching a poll at the end of the session. So please submit your full name in that poll. We don't require your email ID, just your full name and participation will be enough. And yes, just a very quick reminder that for all of you who do that, in the webinar, we will be providing 3 exclusive resources for all the workshop attendees. You will get um, um, 3 playbooks, which is the titles that you can see here. We have a project management interview Q&A guide, a PMP exam prep guide, and as well as a playbook for building the perfect project management portfolio. So please do stay tuned till the end. This is going to be available only in the webinar and not after. Okay, so we know that you've just absorbed a wealth of knowledge on project initiation, planning, quality management, and risk management. Now, there's a lot of way to elevate these skills with the power of Gen AI as well. So, in our professional certificate program in project management with Gen AI, which is delivered in partnership with University Outreach, University of Oklahoma, we integrate advanced AI tools at every stage of project management. Imagine enhancing this whole workflow with AI assisted risk identification, schedule compression, and automated status reporting as well. So these tools are designed to transform the work packages into capstone deliverables, and you will be working on a lot of cutting edge AI tools as well as projects across different domains. But this is just a sneak peek. We have more details coming on the program at the end of the session, so please do stay tuned and let's keep building your future with these with these certifications and tools. So yeah, back to you, Tim. Thank you so much. Over to you to take over.
Thank you very much. And to continue our conversation, I want to talk about 2 more topics, okay? And they're continuous of our conversation. Number one, what do I need to know as a project manager? I said, well, you need to know the business. You need to know about these things about scope, schedule, and budget, and how to put those together and how to bring people together. But you have to understand how to lead, influence, and manage work and people, both individuals and groups. Now, this is going to be important because um, you're going to be a coach and mentor and trainer as well. Okay. I want you to think about this. As a project manager, you're going to see gaps in knowledge. The easiest way to do it is step in there and help them things with things like conflict management, negotiation, and that kind of thing. So you're going to be studying that. The way you can study this is, through our PMP prep program. Now, I, as a lifelong learner, have been studying things like artificial intelligence for about 3 or 4 years. I've been playing with the tools and I've been playing with other items and I've been using them in some of my work to understand them. But it's not just how the tools work, but the impact of the tools. Things like ethics and sustainability that we're all talking about. This is important. That's a component of what you may be wanting to study. The other things I'm studying, and I talked about Ananya before the webinar today on this. Um, I'm understanding leadership more. I'm an author. I wrote a really interesting book on leadership. If you look my name up on Amazon, you can find it. And whether you buy it or not is not important. What's important is that you should realize I think leadership is so important. I spent 4 years researching and 2 years working with my co-author building it. This is what I believe in how important human behavior is and understanding that. And finally, this whole idea of this whole idea of ethics and character, these things that are old fashioned that are becoming new fashioned now, I think they're going to become more important. Now, I do apologize because we're doing this in 3 hours, where I usually do it in 40 hours, in 8 weeks, and 16 weeks. But at the same time, let me do one other item. Vanjani, I'm going to stick to podcasting and webcasting. Okay. Yeah, I think that's enough for me. I'm too intent on getting the knowledge of leading and managing work and leading people, that's my focus. But I'm glad that my voice comes across there. Now, I want to say one thing, okay? You brought up a good point. What if I have a complicated project like a data center? Okay, how are I going to break this down? Well, when I was doing data center work, I worked with the experts. Okay, I went to Gartner. Gartner is a huge international research facility, and they have people who've been studying this. And then I also worked with people who were advisors to Amazon Web Services. And I was working with advisors to Rackspace and those people, right? And I actually consulted with them from a business standpoint when they were working with me from a technological standpoint. So when I look at a data center, I look at it a little differently from everybody else, right? So if I were to design the scope of a data center, I'd go, okay, you got to look at the data, you got to look at the application. So that's one phase. You got to look at the support structure, like the network and the servers and the switches and the routers. And then you have to look at things like power, and you have to look at heat management, and you're going to be moving fluids throughout the building to cool things. And so you have all that infrastructure. And then you have to worry about the building that's going to contain those. And then you have to worry about things like physical and data security. So we have multiple levels, and that is the phase level. And you can imagine. Yeah, I'll share the title of the book at the end of the course, okay? You can imagine that building these phases, it will take weeks, if not months, to get down to the activity levels of these things. And then you have to sequence them. And then you have to figure out the resources and the budget. This is why when we come into a corporation, we say, you want a data center? It's going to take 2.5, 3 years. It's going to take thousands of activities, 500 work packages, and we're going to have to work on it for quite a while. And that's why the project charter, we said at the beginning, the purpose of this is so important, because just the planning is going to take the effort of tens, 50, 90 people, if not 200 or 300. This is what real project management is. Now, your project may be just hosting a conference, or your project may be moving your office from one building to another. It's just as important. And what we're talking about here is that there is a general framework that you can take and apply to any type of work you do. Okay? How can developers use project management skills in real projects? A developer is taking an idea and making it real. It's part of a project because you have to take it. and make it real, that's creating the first instance of the physical deliverable. But then you have to use that deliverable and make sure it functions. And all of a sudden, we're getting into multiple projects, and maintenance is operations. We're not moving on the slides yet, Vanjani, because I'm following up on some questions we talked about earlier, okay? So let's talk about communications now, okay? Let's talk about communications. Why is it important? Without information, no work gets done. Without information, nothing gets done. Information is the lifeblood of a project. So as we're developing our understanding of stakeholders and resources and all these things, we have to figure out, who do we have to involve? That's our stakeholders, end users, clients, right? They're stakeholders too. We have to take into them consideration. What do I need to share with them? How are we doing now? That's our status. What about our risks? What about the decisions we're making? What if our priorities are changing? And then we have something called a milestone. A milestone is an event in your project where you stop and you make a decision. That's what it is. It's a little diamond on your schedule that says, we're going to stop here and we're going to make a decision. So you can imagine that you need to actually have those discussions and share those with everyone. Cadence. What's cadence? Cadence is the timing. But that's a schedule, isn't it? Well, I have to communicate that because the cadence says we're going to meet every Monday morning and talk about what we're going to do. And we're going to meet every Friday afternoon and we're going to talk about what we get done. That sets the timing for the work. And so we're going to have to communicate that too and be prepared for it and make sure everybody's prepared for that too. How do we do this? Well, we're getting into methodologies and tools and channels. Are we going to use dashboards? Are we going to use reports? Are we going to use email? All of these have benefits, but they all have weaknesses. And if you don't do it in the way your organization does it, you have to have a really good reason for stepping out. Okay, like Slack. At my university, we don't use Slack. So if we're going to use Slack, I have to have a really good reason, and everybody has to buy into that reason, or it's not going to work. Communication is tricky. It has to do not just with how do we functionally move information, but how do people want to share information? So it's a negotiation between you and the stakeholders that create good communication. And why do we do this? Prevent surprises. Nobody likes to hear something a day before launch like things are not ready, right? You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that everybody knows the efforts that we're doing at the beginning are just as important as the efforts at the end. And this is where communications can be very effective. It keeps everybody involved, it keeps everybody focused, and it helps everybody understand how their efforts are impacting the project for better or worse. Communications. Boy, it's so important. So, how do we do this? Well, we have tools, right? As you're developing your resources, you're going to figure out, okay, how are we going to work with issues? An issue is not a risk. A risk is a future event that might occur. An issue is a risk that's occurred. It is here and now. We have to deal with it. And sometimes an issue is an unplanned event. We didn't plan for the risk. And all of a sudden that risk becomes really important. So we want to look at issues, not just risks. And we need to keep an idea of that in our heads and be able to share it with others. on a moment's notice, right? This is where our meetings, this is where our communications helped us, especially when it comes to change. You know how we created that plan? Now, if we're going to change that plan, we have to have a really good justification. So we're going to have to be able to communicate why these changes must occur. On the right-hand side, we have this acronym called Reiki, right? Responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And in our course, we talk about building a Reiki chart where it says, okay, if I want people to do work and do work well, they need to know what their work is. So I'm going to say, okay, here are the activities. Here are the people who are going to do the work, and I'm going to mark them as responsible. And here are the leads. They own the results, right? They're accountable. They're concerned about the outcome. And they're going to be the sign-off people usually. Okay. So that talks about the work. But the Reiki chart also talks about communication and the flow of information. Who do I need to ask? They're the consulted ones, and they may be team members I can go to. Maybe they're stakeholders, or maybe they're industry experts. And then we're going to get into informed. I need to share information with them so they can get their jobs done, whether it's teams or a stakeholder. And you're right. What we're developing here is a Reiki matrix. Here are the people, and I'm naming names. Here are the activities, and here they are. And are they an R, an a C, or an I? So when we do go through this, we don't get confused. The worst thing that can happen on a project is confusion. Okay? That's why communication is so important because communication stalls work, no progress. If you can lay this out and make it very clear, people know what they're supposed to do. And if you can find a better way to do it, you're going to have to communicate that too. So we're talking about change management again. So if you're going to change things, you're going to have to communicate that too. So we talked in our first part about laying out all this stuff, and now we're starting to talk about how we're going to manage this. We'll talk about phase gates a little bit later. Really quickly, before we move on from this slide, a phase gate is an event or a meeting at the beginning or end of a phase that says, are we ready to start? Are we ready to end? Are we ready to go to the next phase? Does the Reiki matrix change as the project? Oh, yes, it can. It can through change control. Ranjit, if they found a better way to do the work, right? If we're improving quality, it can change, or maybe we have to change. So does project management involve who is the team? Um, Sometimes we're given the people who are available, and we're going to have to coach and mentor and make sure they're ready for their roles. Not like building a database or that kind of thing, right? Not that type of role. I'm talking about what's their role in the team? How are they going to contribute? How are they interacting? And how are they going to engage? This is the part of what makes a good project a fantastic project as a project manager. Okay, does that help you? And yeah, is the PM responsible for creating and defining? Maybe, maybe not. But I'm going to make sure that you understand one thing. Whether or not they create the document, they need to make sure that there is absolute clarity in what people are assigned to what work and they have what they need to get the work done. Decision gate and the phase gate are actually the same thing. It's just a different term. Does Reiki ensure quality management? Not comprehensively, but it's a component you can imagine, right? It yeah, quality management, quality planning can influence your Reiki chart, definitely. Oh, VUCA. Okay, let's take 3 minutes here, okay? VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, okay? This is a big gray cloud. You may not realize it, but we have many big gray clouds in our society today, right? Agile. In fact, the framework that I belong to, right? The Project Management Institute's project management framework, um, just acquired the Agile Alliance. That's how important Agile is. And then in fact, in the PMP prep material, that's half of the work. I'm just talking about projects in general here. And when we get into VUCA, that the thing is, a Reiki chart is a communication chart, but it actually influences quality. Think about this. Think about this. And this is why we talk about integration so much, okay? Because a Reiki chart talks about communication and who gets what work done. But that's going to make doing work correctly easier and more effective, right? So this is the big part. And this is what a project manager really does. They may not do all the little pieces of the work, but they're the ones who pull everything together. Think about the orchestra conductor. Think about the captain of the ship. They have to know all the pieces of the work and how they put together and make sure it fits together. On a small project and an informal project, this may not be as critical, but as we get to these huge projects, like building a data center and building a cell tower, this gets really critical. What will be an issue escalation timeline, escalation matrix? Um, you know what? That's important in certain production and manufacturing environments and certain other things, especially when you get into hospitals too. It's important. And this is why I said at the beginning, understanding how your business works. It's a component of business in itself, the business operations. And understanding how that works is going to impact how you design your project. Okay? Okay. So, yeah, let's move on. We're in execution. Yay, right? What's happening in execution? Two things, right? The team is creating the deliverable, and the project manager is collecting the data and ensuring that the team is productive and the stakeholders, the interested people, are involved. Okay. We're directing and managing project work. Okay. We're managing work. We're authorizing tasks. We're coordinating daily. We're looking at things that are blocking work, right? That's an issue. An issue can be something that stops work. Work stoppage is the most critical component that you can look for. Work slowing down is important too, but work stoppage is the worst kind of issue that you can have. Now, we're also communicating and we're involving our stakeholders. So, as we talked about planning communication, we're doing communication and make sure that the communication is effective as it can. Now, where we managed work, we're leading people. One of the things that we talk about in project management is like what we talk about in Agile, servant leadership. The very best type of a project manager is somebody who actually makes sure everything is available for people to do the work, right? They have the tools, they have the time, they can get the resources they need. They may need training. That's part of leadership too. And they may not make all the decisions, but they're going to facilitate them. And like I said, one of the important things is we're going to be collecting data. Now, notice we're not analyzing data yet because in execution, that's where the data is created and we're collecting and organizing it. One of the things that we want to think about is issues and risks. A risk, once it occurs, is now an issue. But like I said, if we didn't identify risks, some issues are unplanned events. So we need to keep an issue log and a risk register. And you can imagine that a risk that occurs and you respond to it, over it goes to the issue log. And then it can close. So we're going to have this cycle of information not just going between people, but actually between documents. Because documents are containers of information. They keep us organized, they keep the information clear, and they keep this understanding of where we are right now in a way that everybody can agree. Okay? Now, let's look at communication and execution for our client portal that we're building in, right? We're creating an onboarding portal and we're saying, here's the scope, here's the schedule, we're getting it built. What's a Reiki? Okay. User interface. Who's going to lead it? Well, probably the user interface lead, right? One of the team members who's really good and has done this 20 times is going to be leading other people who can do pieces, and maybe in future projects they'll become leads too. So those are my R's and my A's. Who do I need to communicate this with? Well, I'm probably going to use a couple clients, and so I want to be able to ask them, is that what you want? We're going to have little pilots and demonstrations of user interfaces for them to look at. So they're going to be consulted. And maybe, finance needs to be informed because they want to know when they need to release funds for parts of the work. So all of a sudden, we're building our Reiki for our communication that we're going to be using in execution. And the communication plan, who are we going to need to be talking to? Like I said, who do we need to talk to on Monday morning? Who do we need to talk to on Friday afternoon? It may not be Monday, Friday. It may be every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks. But what is the cadence? Are we going to do it over Zoom? Are we going to do it over email? Are we going to do it over a cup of coffee in the cafeteria? What does it look like? Okay, what does our communication look like? An issue arises and the development team is blocked by a missing API. Okay, so how am I going to do this? On the issue log, I'm going to say missing API, impact, high, work stoppage for the development team. Who am I going to assign this to? Probably the accountable who has the relationship with the vendor. And that may be me. It may be purchasing. It may be one of the development team's experts who actually has that relationship. And I'll assign that issue to them and I'll check with them. And if it's work stoppage, I'm going to be checking with them a couple times a day, aren't I? Okay. So is this a risk or an issue? Well, is this a current event or a future event? This is current, so it's an issue. Goes up to the top, right? And we say, okay, let's going to do it. And like I said, this is why in my communications, I'm going to change it for whoever this issue is assigned to and say, what can we do? What can we do? What can we do? I'm not bugging them because if I bug them, I'm going to get in their way, but I'm going to make sure they have what they need to solve this in the most efficient manner. Wow. Okay, so we're doing executing, right? We're managing the work, we're supporting the team, we're engaging the stakeholders, we're collecting data. Over here, on a parallel path, we're monitoring, controlling. We're taking that data, turning it into information, and also being able to forecast. How do I forecast? Well, I don't want to just forecast, can I? Right? We have data. We have to organize that data to create information. What do I mean? Data says we spent $4,000 last week, right? Is that good or bad? I don't know. How much work did we get out of that $4,000? Information says we're now a week behind. Because we didn't spend $4,000, we're now behind work. And that's status. So monitoring, controlling is turning data to information. It's also changing progress to status. And if we understand progress to status, we can estimate or forecast what this does for the end of the project and future activities. Because remember, our critical path, if any activity along that critical path is delayed, all the others get delayed, including the end of the project. So we're looking at plan value. This is the plan that we put together, right? This is the work and the money behind it. This is what we started with. We also call it a baseline. And then we have the earned value. What is the work we have completed compared to our plan? Plan value to earned value. Are we ahead or behind schedule? And then what's the actual money we spent? So if we have our plan up here, our actuals are the earned value, the actual work, and the actual cost. And so we're going to be looking at not just are we ahead or behind schedule, that's our schedule variance, but we also look at how much work did we get done for the money we spent? Are we over budget? Right? Did we spend too much money for the work we got done? Now, you can imagine if you're not spending money in the right way, you can't get your work done. But if you're not getting work done, it's going to impact the way you're scheduling money. So, this earned value looks at both your budget and your schedule together. Because why? Because we're our quality is not just in creating the deliverable, our quality is also in managing the project. So we're going to do root cause analysis. Is this a budget problem? Is this a schedule problem? Do we have a lack of skills? Do we need to get some training in there? What do we need to do, right? So our quality planning is not just for creating the deliverable, it's also for managing the work. But we don't just stop there because we don't just want to look at status, we want to look at forecasting. Schedule performance index, right? What's that? That's looking at velocity, how quickly we're getting work done. And you can actually see velocity in the work slowing down more and more and more. You can also look at budget. Are we spending money? Spending money is not just, oops, it happened on Thursday. If you look at spending money, it's a habit inside of a project. And you can actually say, we've spent money in this manner. We were just spending money like crazy. You can imagine that's going to give you one type of a forecast. And all of a sudden, we're misers on another project and we're not spending money. And that's going to be a forecast on another thing. And spending a lot of money and not spending enough money are are both negative impacts on a project that a project manager can capture, organize, and understand. Not just to fix a problem, but to make sure that everybody is not surprised at the progress and the results of a project. See how communication is part of earned value? We have status reports, right? What happened and where we are. We have forecast reports, right? What's our revised budget at the end of the project based on how we're spending money today? We can actually figure this out with this type of math. What's the difference? See, variance is really important because that's how I figured out we're ahead or behind schedule or we're over or under budget. Now, all of these things can be wrapped up in a dashboard. And this is what's really powerful. If you can give everybody a screenshot of our budget position, our schedule provision, our milestones, our changes, our issues, risks, and the objective in one screenshot, you can imagine how organized and how focused your communication can be. Number one, it's a great agenda topic for a project. Number two, it allows us all to agree where we are on this project and what changes need to be made to make it successful. Let's talk about change control. We talked about change management. What's the difference between change management and change control, first of all? Okay. Can I show any created dashboard, for example? I wish I could. We don't have time today. I wish I could. In future events, I'll add a snapshot because I create a dashboard for all of my PMP prep classes, right? We use earned value to manage our PMP prep classes. Isn't that interesting? Now, when I talk about change management says, how do I prepare the people and the organization and the teams and the stakeholders for change? It's not just, you know, building a cell tower or building a data center or something like that. It's not just that, because it's going to change the way people do work. And so change management is preparing the people in their mindset as well as that, right? When I get to change control now, we're talking about changes, good changes, or what we call necessary changes, right? Laws and regulations change. You're going to have to change your plan, right? Maybe a lockdown occurs. All of a sudden, we have another version of COVID, and it's even worse this time. What are we going to do? You know, this is something that we had to contend with in 2019, 2020, and your project in the future may have other impacts too. Okay. So, what are we going to do in our change control? And this needs to be laid out and it needs to be communicated. How do we identify the changes? Probably two or three ways: through change requests, through necessary changes, and through other change vehicles, right? There's a lot of directions we get change from. And then we have to lay them out and understand the impact, right? What does it impact? What level of impact does it occur? Because a change may be an issue. And then we may have a change control board. Does every project have a change control board? No. You may just have the team and the project manager agree, right? These are the people who assess the changes and then determine the dispensation. Is that approved, rejected, or deferred? But on critical projects like I'm talking about with cell towers and data centers, guess what? You're going to have a bunch of really deep experts that are there only to help you to make these critical changes. And they're going to be helping you with that analysis and the dispensation. And that's what a decision is. It's what we call dispensation. Approved, where you update the baselines, right? Reject it. Where you're going to say, no, this is not a necessary change, and this is why. And then finally, deferred. Not today. It doesn't mean it's not a good change. It means that it's not relevant to today. Okay. And this is where we update the baselines. This is where we communicate. And this is where we hand back that decision and any changes back into execution for the team to apply. Okay. Oh, good question. Before we go into the learning check, I'm going to answer one question. What about Agile? Agile does it all the time. See, the thing is, we have a change control system in traditional or predictive projects, but Agile is made in such a way that you're working directly as a team with stakeholders with these little experiments we call iterations. And at the beginning of the week, you say, this is what we did, this is where we are, this is where we're going to be working this next week. And then you do the work. You create something called a prototype or a pilot. You bring them in to demonstrate it. And then you and the stakeholders say, okay, let's move it into the backlog. Or we say, nope, that's for a future backlog. And a backlog is like an agile baseline. So it works on a very, very regular basis. Okay. Okay. So the dev team reports 60% tasks done, but only 50% of the budget spent. Is this good or bad? Well, let's think. We did 60% of the work with 50% of the money. Now, assuming all the work is equal across the entire project, that means we spent only 50% of the money for 60% of the work. So it looks like we're either ahead of schedule or we're under budget or both. Okay. Our schedule variance is extra 10% of work. Our budget variance is we're under budget. Okay. Isn't that beautiful? Earned value does not have to be complicated, but it has to be understood. So as your project gets more complicated, your monitoring, controlling, your analysis is going to have to actually accommodate that complication. A stakeholder requests adding multi-language support mid-project. Okay, so how do we handle that? We take that change request, we document it right in a change log, and then we assess it. Is this important or not? How many of our clients historically speak multiple languages? And is this a request something that's not just relevant, but communicated on a regular basis for us to where we need to pay attention to it more than others? That's the impact analysis. And other components like how does this impact our budget? How does this impact our resources and schedule? And does it add extra risk, right? So we're looking at all these things and we're saying, okay, based on that, what do we agree, guys? You want to do it? You want to work Saturday nights? Or we can't work Saturday nights and this has to be done between 8 and 5. And so these conversations are going to be different, but they have to occur. Okay. And then we can approve and make the changes. And you can imagine adding multiple languages in mid-project, adding multiple languages maybe in a project itself. And this is where we're going to have hard conversations with ourselves, with our team and our sponsor and our stakeholders to say, is this important enough that we need to stop today's project? Number one, is this important enough we need to make this as its own project? Or number three, is this so simple all we have to do is add this? Okay. Which report would you send to the project sponsor? And what would it contain? Sponsors are like executives. They're high-level strategy people. So you don't want to show them all the risks, maybe just the top 3 to 5. And you may want to give them where we are today and where you think we're going tomorrow, right? And on top of that, you want to have the objectives and the top 3 to 5, not just risks, but issues that we're contending with, so they can map in their mind where we're going. And then you can provide the context. Okay. That's what we're looking at. A dashboard is great. A status and forecast is great. But some way that shows the logic of where we're going. So when you give sponsors advice, they make good decisions. See, that's the role of the sponsor, making the decisions of the project, where your job is to provide advice. The top 5 or 6, Shaheen, I'm looking at the full spectrum of projects. Okay, on a data center, we're going to look at the top 15 to 30. But if we're looking at like managing the execution of a conference, or are we talking about moving an office from one building to another? Yeah, it depends. I've found that keeping the top 3 to 5 in weekly, if not daily conversation, keeps everybody focused. Okay. And again, we always say this is not all of them. We don't want to hide the other items, but we want to use them as a focus because it's the critical ones that we're going to need to deal with first. And there we go. Now, there's something that happens near the end of a project. Okay. We have verification that says, are we doing work correctly? We have validation, which means, are we completing the work? Validation checks off all the pieces of the deliverable. Verification checks off the quality assurance and quality control. Now, there's going to come a time which says, okay, we're done. In traditional projects, we're looking at this from a standpoint of acceptance criteria. What are the criteria we need to sign off on for us to say we're done? That's part of the scope. That was actually part of the initial scope baseline. And we want to keep that in our crosshairs of our journey through the project because we want to get there in as efficient manner as possible. We're going to do this through testing and inspections. We're going to do this through validation and verification. And then we have something called user acceptance testing. It's not just us and the team signing off on this, it's the stakeholders, the people who are going to live with this deliverable who need to sign off on it. We're talking about formal acceptance, right? We're talking about some way of saying we all agree. Now, we all agree, maybe everyone says yes. We all agree may say consensus. I don't agree that everything's done. But for the sake of us to move on, for the sake of us here, I believe my concerns are secondary and we can release it to the way we are. See, that's where consensus really helps us in all decisions. We don't all have to agree, but there are times where we may disagree, but we need to support the group. And so a project manager does not just support decisions, they support consensus. Some of the other things we do in closure has to do with transitioning activities, right? How do we move the deliverable from the development to operations or even the market, right? Projects can be a new type of ketchup or some type of other condiment that we're creating, right? And we're launching it into the marketplace. Well, there's going to be a time where we hand it off from the team to the actual people who are going to support and maintain that deliverable. And so we have to do it in such a way it makes it very easy for them to do this. Okay. We also have something called lessons learned. Remember, we talked about in quality? What did we talk about? Continuous improvement. It doesn't just happen within a project. We want to capture this for future projects. So as we're progressing through the entire project, we're adding to our wealth of knowledge. And hopefully, we don't just share it inside the project, we're able to share it with the organization as well. There's team recognition. Remember that understanding human behavior I talked about? It's really important as we get to the closure of the project, okay? And we want to save this because that's future work history. So we're going to take all our documentation and put it in a format such that we know it's not active, but we can go back to it in the future. And then we have that administrative closure, which means releasing resources, closing contracts, closing all financial records. Okay. Is there any difference in project closure in predictive and agile? It's the difference in the cadence, the timing of the activities, and it's also difference in the tone. Because in agile projects, basically you're very cyclic in nature. You have these multiple releases, right? Like Microsoft and Apple and even Nike does this, right? They create a release and then they add to that release and add to it, right? That's agile, okay? And then within those releases, we have those iterations. So you can imagine that we're actually working with this whole closure in a different way. And the beautiful thing about agile is that you don't just have to say no to a change. You can say that's a great change. We're going to take it to this iteration, or we're going to make a new iteration, or you're going to say that's a great change for the future. Let's add it to another release, right? And again, you come to this through consensus negotiation. Um, Team recognition, we talked about that transition. Okay, okay, great.
Okay, Tim, I just cannot thank you enough for covering such a wide range of essential project management concepts. I think we are going to be a little ahead of time as well. So I'm just going to take a few moments to recap what we've learned and what can be potential next steps on taking this further. And then we will launch a poll to take your submissions for the certificate recording and deck. So please do stay tuned. Yes. So I want to take a moment to highlight the key learnings that Tim has given us in the workshop. First, we explore the importance of writing a business case, which serves as the backbone for project justification. This foundational skill ensures that every project starts with a clear purpose and aligned objectives. Next, we delved into drafting a project charter, an important step in project initiation as outlined by the PMBOK itself. This document helps in formalizing project goals, roles, and responsibilities right from the start. And then we learned about building a work breakdown structure or WBS as given here. This was another critical area which focuses on scope management. So this technique is crucial in breaking down projects into manageable sections, promoting clarity and efficiency. Then we also discussed risk management and risk register, which is again a very essential tool for identifying and mitigating potential project risks. Moving on, designing communication plans under stakeholder management is something that we discussed about. So this ensures that all parties are informed and engaged throughout the project life cycle. So this is another critical concept that we covered today. And in the execution phase, we discussed logging issues, applying the Reiki matrix to streamline roles and communication. And for monitoring and control, we learned how schedule variance and cost variance are calculated, along with walking through the change control processes as well. So these core skills form a strong foundation in project management and are vital for any aspiring or practicing project manager. So as we prepare to transition to the next steps, remember that mastering these concepts is just the knowing about these concepts is just the beginning of your journey. There's a long way to go in mastering them and applying them in your day-to-day work, right? So um, yes, so a lot of ground was covered here, but like Tim said, it is hours and days of curriculum that we have tried to compress briefly for you in this free 3 hour workshop. Like I said, today might have given you a good foundation in terms of vocabulary, in terms of the mental models, a charter, WPS, a risk register, and EVM calculations. But the honest truth is, in 3 hours, we move fast. There was a lot to cover. So each of these domains, whether it's risk or quality, scheduling or stakeholder management, they deserve a lot of depth and more practice, especially if you're heading towards the PMP exam or looking to use AI in your workflow. So if you want like deeper understanding and develop more skills and need more hands-on learning experience, then you are going to have to think about what's next. Because well, as great as workshops and master classes can be, you will get a holistic, structured, and guided learning experience and exposure only when you enroll in a program. And that's what the professional certificate program in project management with Gen AI, delivered in partnership with University Outreach, University of Oklahoma, is designed to do. I'm going to take just a few minutes talking about the program, but please do stay tuned because you all know what is coming. We have some great resources in store, as well as the poll that we will launch very soon for those of you who need the deck, the recording, and most
And
importantly, the
something else,
certificate.
Ananya, real quickly, we ended a little bit early, and I
Mhm.
like that. So,
Yeah.
so one of the things that we can think about is we have time to interact and engage with you and hear your questions, and I can bring in certain levels of expertise, such as what does AI look at project management for day to day, and where do we think AI is going to impact project management and project managers. So I can bring you some of the things that I talk about publicly. I've been researching this for the last 3.5, 4 years, and I already lecture on this. But I can do it at the end of this course. So no, we're not going to leave early, especially on the volume and the intensity of the questions being asked. I know that you guys are full of questions, and I want to give you the full value of this webinar, which means let's use that extra time in the Q&A session.
Okay, amazing, amazing. That'll be great, Tim. Thank you so much. Okay, so you might ask, the PMP certification is very valuable on its own already, right? So definitely. So why do we need another certificate program? So here's what is crucial to understand. The way you or most people prep for PMP certification might be self-directed or might be a little theory heavy. There might be less of Gen AI component and might not be a capstone where you actually simulate running a project. But this program is built differently. You get 35 contact hours that count towards your PMP eligibility. You get PDUs as well, which I will talk about a little further. Plus, you learn 15 plus AI tools through 25 plus live demos. You work with expert instructors and academic masterclass from OU faculty, and you finish with a capstone project in 3 domains. At the end, you also get a joint certificate from OU Outreach and Simply Learn. So, Here are four things that I just want to highlight. The credential that you will get from the program is globally recognized. Like I said, it's a joint certificate with a digital badge backed by the University of Oklahoma. And if you're someone who is already prepping for PMP, which we saw that most of you are in the audiences are, then you're also getting 80 plus videos, 35 contact hours, 14 plus mock tests that you can take in your preparation phase, and over 2000 practice questions and a full simulation exam as well that's included in as part of this program. And the Gen AI curriculum is not just a separate chapter. It is woven into every phase, and it's not just like an individual add-on, right? So, and that's also an important key feature here. And the capstone is a full AI driven simulation where you pick a domain and run a project through it. So this is just a few highlights that we want to give. The program runs over 12 weeks. It's fully live and online. And here's how it's structured. You start with an introductory session, move into the PMP exam prep, then agile and hybrid frameworks, then AI and digital tools in project management, and then PMO implementation in scaling. This might be very relevant as you grow further in your career, or if you already have a few years of experience and you're looking into gaining more leadership, getting on the leadership track, then this module is going to be very key for you. And then there is an OU academic masterclass as well, and like I mentioned, you close out with the AI driven capstone project. Okay, so great. Just to ground this in why it matters right now, right? So the project management job market is genuinely looking very strong. There's a projected need for 25 million new PM professionals globally by 2030. That number is just mind blowing. And PMP certified managers earn on average 33% more than their non-certified peers. This was one of the findings that PMI released in its report. And the average US salary for a project manager sits around $120,000. And companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, Oracle, Accenture, they're actively hiring people with project management skills, and this demand is only going to get higher and higher, like the numbers show here. So, beyond the curriculum, if you're looking for additional career support, then let me tell you that a whole layer of career support is built into the program. Technical assessments to sharpen your proficiency, mock interview prep, so you can articulate your skills more confidently, and AI-powered tools to optimize your resume and LinkedIn visibility, as well as curated job opportunities matched to your profile. So these are some of the things that you will get as part of the job assist plus that Simplilearn will be giving you. And the point here is you're not just earning a certificate, you're also being set up to actually use the certificate to its maximum potential. And this is basically the end-to-end support, and this is what makes this a very career a good career investment. So those of you who are interested, here are the program investment details for learners from the USA. The program is priced at $2,699. And if you would prefer to split that up, we've got installment options through Split It and Klarna as low as $270 a month. For our audiences from other parts of the world, let me just quickly share a link here. Allow me a moment. Okay, so you can find the exact fee in your local currency on our program page, which I've just shared in the chat box. So please do check it out. And just to recap, here's what is included in the program. PMI digital materials, hands-on learning with 15 plus tools, 25 plus live demos, 10 plus guided practice sessions, 80 plus PDUs, 35 contact hours, and the flexibility to reschedule your cohort within the first 90 days if at all you need to. Right? So if you want more details, there is a QR code on the screen. Scan it and it will take you straight to the program page. And if you have any specific questions, our team is available to walk you through it. So just reach out to them after the session. With that, I'm going to launch a poll to take your interest in enrolling in the program. All you have to do is vote yes or no in this poll. Please participate and drop in your answers right now. Even if you have any queries, you need more details, you can click on yes. Like I said, our expert advisor will get in touch with you and guide you forward. And in case if you're voting no, feel free to let us know why in the chat box. We would genuinely like to know what is holding you back and understand how we can do better. Right, so I'm going to have that poll live for a little while, and I will move on to the Q&A segment. Tim, I think a lot of PMP related questions have come in. So in the chat box, so maybe a couple of quick questions we can take here, and then we can go into the Q&A box questions. But you let me know at what point you would like to deep dive into the AI application that you said that you want to cover it more in detail.
So I heard a lot of things from the webinar chat. AI, what about the changes to the PMP prep program as well as the PMBOK? What's the future of project management? What, how do I calculate earned value, planned value, and actual cost? What about Tim's book? What does a small business owner have to consider about project management and project managers? Who defines the critical path and how to prepare? Okay, so bing, 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 right? We got a lot of things here. Okay. Um, I'm going to take each one of these in probably 3 to 5 minutes. And are there any Q&A out there, Ananya, that are outside of this topic that I can include in the list so I can consider them?
Yes, yes, Tim. There are about 6 to 7 questions that I can see in the Q&A box. You
Okay,
want me to post
so
that in the chat? I can post that in the chat
yeah, go
if
ahead and post in chat and so I can add them to the checklist and respond to them. Okay.
okay. Okay.
Now,
I will keep
everyone,
doing that.
yeah, thank you, Ananya. And everyone, consider this, okay? I have been teaching PMP preparation for 22 years now. I've been a project manager for 35 years in every industry. Okay. Next, what do I need to consider here? I'm a lecturer at a university, so I have to follow a very strict guideline of talking about what I talk about in public. So the value you have by coming to this webinar is getting some of the most up-to-date knowledge that you can. I've worked inside of PMI with the content developers of the training program that PMI releases. I've been building practice questions for 2.5 years for the training programs, not just Simplilearn, but also PMI. So you can imagine my depth of knowledge now. Okay, now let's go in. Let's talk about these one by one. Okay, artificial intelligence. We know what it is today. We don't know what it's going to be tomorrow. So, what we're having to do is two things as both learners and knowledge people. Number one, how do I use agent based or agentic artificial intelligence today, right? We know that they can actually create data. I'm working with Claude. I was working with ChatGPT. I'm finding some interesting variations with Claude. Claude can actually now, if you pay for it, create a little folder and you can say, okay, Claude, let's call this folder a project. And it can create a little baby large language model, a little language model just for your project. And Claude can use that as a component of its analysis. Isn't that cool? So, for a project standpoint, it helps you with this integration component, but it also helps you with things like, okay, I have a text file here. Can you help me understand what the phases are? Or a bunch of I have a bunch of budget decisions I need to make. Here's five similar projects. What do you advise? And this is something you have to realize. Claude and ChatGPT and all the other agents, right? They have one thing in common. Number one, they collect data. Number two, they can organize data. You have to make sense of it. Now, when I say you, I don't just mean the project manager. Okay? Okay. So the other thing is ethics. How do I use this? Am I using it in an ethical manner? Can I actually say, since Claude gave me this information, it's my information now? We don't know that yet. Nobody's discussing about that. And from a sustainability standpoint, this is something that you have a voice in, I have a voice in, we all have a voice in. How is this going to have a lasting impact on project management? This is something that PMI is talking about this year. We're having conferences about this all the time, because AI is not going to be the same. Um, okay, so let's talk about the new PMP program. Okay, PMBOK just came out, right? It was launched here in May, right? It's been out since October. The exam changes in July, but it's not the PMBOK alone that's impactful because we have the exam content outline, which talks about what's going to be on the exam. And we talk about that in the course too. And that's changing. And the way we're training people on project management, because PMBOK 8 now talks about things like artificial intelligence and other disruptive technologies and tools, right? It's not just that, just machine language itself, a piece of AI has changed things since the 1980s and continues to change things. So, what's the role of us? And I believe, like a lot of other experts out there, I believe that we're going to become more and more strategic. There's two factors that I'm hearing both from the public and also within research. Number one, AI is going to be integrated in everything that we touch. And number two, management and working is going to be integrated too. Everything's going to go flat. This is the big detail. Okay. What's happening is, and I'm hearing this more and more in public conversation as well as in research, that managers are going to be expected to also be workers. So we're going to go to a facilitated model where project management is just another role and we share it either as a group or we determine a lead. Is communication more important than technical skills? I'll jump into this really quickly, okay? Yes and no, okay? A lot of projects, a lot of projects require that you need to understand technology. Like I managed the pilot of the next generation of a quantum processor at my university, okay? And it was based on photonics, not on not on electrons. So what's going to happen here, right? I don't have to know quantum physics in photonics, but I need to have the experts, but I have to understand quantum science to a certain level. So this is the problem that we're going to have. We have to be lifelong learners. And not only that, but we have to coach and mentor everybody around us to be lifelong learners and not be surprised by these things, okay? That's the future. Now, yes, yes, Illinois, yeah, the team I was working with, we're tied in with them and Maryland and that kind of thing. We're in a little bit of a different hub down here in the southern part of the United States, but we all talk. It's a small community right now. So earn value, plan value, and actual cost. How do I turn those into numbers? Okay. This is important. How do I look at this? Well, it depends on the objective. What do you want to measure? Do you want to measure work done by pieces of work, like work packages and phases? You have to do that a little bit. So you have to have a good breakdown structure and put that in a reasonable schedule. So you can say not only we're getting work done, right? And that's our requirements. So we're going to have some types of check off for our requirements, but we also have to say we're ahead of schedule or behind schedule. So we have to have that timing or that cadence laid out in a schedule baseline. And so this is going to be different. Sometimes it's done by half day, sometimes it's done by hour, sometimes it's done by week or month. It depends on the necessity of the project. Okay. Book title. Okay. I'm going to type it into the chat. Okay. Let's see here. Everyone. Um, Work smarter, not harder. And that's Jersak and Jerome. This is a leadership book, okay? And again, I don't push my book so much, but this is an interesting book because it's a field manual. It like takes you through the facets of leadership and it gives you exercises and experiments. It's not intended to be reading like from front to back. You pull it out and you say, okay, conflict management. Okay, how about negotiation? How do I lead up? And this is how it's built. Okay. Okay. Small business owner. Oh, small business owners are fantastic. Bless you guys if you run a small business. Okay. I know the pains. Not only do you have to understand project management, but you have to grow project managers. And you have to be ready to grow project managers. How do you grow a project manager? You take your teams, you're the first project manager, right? And you find your team leads and you coach and you mentor and train them. And then of those team leads who are more strategic, because a project manager is that person who sits between the strategy, the objective, and the work. And that's really important. What kind of content questions in AI? Really quick answer. It's these things you need to consider with AI, right? Like schedule. AI is great for planning right now, but again, it's not so good for saying you need a finish to finish here and a finish to start. The more complex questions you ask AI, the more deviation you're going to get from true accuracy. It's just like asking people, okay? And again, it doesn't get into a great level of detail. It's just what we know today. What do we know today? How to write good prompts to create things like a work breakdown structure and a risk register and these kind of things. That's what you're going to look at when you see AI in it. Is waterfall still relevant? Predictive or traditional projects? Yes. Why? Because laws and regulations aren't going to go anywhere. Like how do you build a building? Okay? How do you build a building? You need codes. You need inspections. You need plumbing and that kind of thing. And those things require waterfall methodology, right? So what we're finding is some projects may be predictive and some projects are agile. Most projects are going to be in the middle, what we call hybrid. Okay. Do we need to provide all the WBS to ChatGPT to get good scheduling? Um, you know, what you put in, you get out. What I've found in my experience and the experience of others, even in informal projects, if you go through a work breakdown structure with your team 3 to 5 times, even on a 6-week project, you're going to get a really good work breakdown structure, which means you're going to get a really good schedule. Now, that's just for a 6 week project. So for a 6 month or a 2 or 5 year project, you can imagine how many iterations you're going to go through. And it takes a whole level of complexity to look at that. When I start practice questions, there's different way in which a question in PMI logic is interpreted on different sources. Actually, Simplilearn practice questions are in alignment with PMI. You know why I know? I was trained by PMI to write practice questions. And guess what my relationship with Simplilearn is? Often I'm brought in to validate that these PMP questions are relevant and are similar to what you'll have on the exam. Isn't that cool? How do I manage it? Well, the big deal about practice questions is they don't ask you facts. Okay, they don't ask you things like, what's a schedule or what's a risk register. They ask you, okay, here's the problem. You have this issue. Here's the stakeholder here. Here's the information here. And here's the decision here. What do you do? That's what the PMP exam is about. And that's what practice questions prepare you for. They don't ask you about recognition and comprehension. They ask you about the application. And that's where the exam content outline comes in. The exam content outline talks about the exam. It talks about the tasks you perform. So when you're preparing for the exam, you don't just look at the PMBOK, you look at the exam content, the outline for the exam, and you learn that here are the tasks. And if you understand the tasks that you're supposed to perform, you're going to get more of the questions right, okay? Being a PMP, but not a technical expert, how can I lead a team by setting an example? Well, yeah, you can be a coordinator or facilitator, but what if you understand human behavior? What if you really understand leadership? What if you really understand business? See, that's like having an MBA. In MBA, you're not an expert, but you're an expert in pulling things together, reading a room. There are a couple people over there with red faces. There are a couple people over here hiding behind a laptop. You know there's a conflict. You know what you need to do when you walk into that room. You don't have to have the information, but you have to pull it together in such a way that people can come to an agreement and move on and get the work going again. Okay, that's what we see. And it's not important in these 6 to 8 week projects. Yeah, you're going to be a coordinator or expediter there. But when we get into the 6 month and 2 year and 3 year projects, this is where the maturity of a project manager comes to lead. Now, how is that important today? I can make $35 to $45 an hour as an expediter, as a project coordinator. My co-author, Merv Jersak, had 30 years as a project manager, and he did these huge projects. He was making upwards of $175 to $250 an hour. Can you imagine? But the thing is, with that paycheck comes incredible responsibility and incredible accountability, and it takes months, if not years, of preparation. And this is why we have things like a PMP. How do the role of business analysts, or what are some of the biggest mistakes beginners make in project planning? Okay, so mistakes I make as a project manager are mistakes in schedule, budget, scope. Okay, that's fine. Okay. Now, if you can get that right in the first 2 years, that's fine. But then you graduate to the other things: leadership, negotiation, how to work with groups, how to work with people, how to get work from stalling to moving forward efficiently. The PMP preparation gives you an idea of these things, but you're going to be practicing these things for 3 to 5 years. Think of it like martial arts. You know, martial arts, it takes what, 5 to 6 years to develop your black belt, but that's just the first 5 or 6 years. And it's the same thing as project managers. And as you get there, then you start learning there's another nuance to project management and another nuance. And this is what we're talking about. Really quickly, how important are degrees like BTech or MBA? Degrees are fantastic. Education is fantastic. Okay. Number one, education is not going to go away and it is important. Number two, training and certificates are important. I work with the national laboratories here in the United States, right? And they say, give me an engineer and I'll get them trained, like through Simplilearn or somebody else, in project management, right? Well, there's training, but there's also continuous learning and improvement in order to retain your PMP. You're going to have to collect hours of personal development. And if you collect 60 hours of personal development every 3 years, all you have to do is recertify, which is a fraction of the cost, and you don't have to take the test again. So this is what we really value is not just attaining that first level, but getting into the nuance and nuance and nuance. And that's the greatest mistake I see people. They hit a level and they don't continue. Okay. How do the roles of business analyst and a project manager overlap? A business analyst is me. I'm a business analyst too. We work mostly, a business analyst works mostly on strategy. If you think of a business case and a project charter, before a project's approved, the business analyst is going to work on the business case and doing the financial analysis and that kind of thing. And the project manager, if they're working, they're going to be working on the project charter, taking the business analyst's information and using it to support their project proposal. Okay. How do the roles, how will estimate and completion help in resource forecasting? Ah, estimate at completion says, okay, we're here today. We've had some deviations from schedule and budget, right? We always do. And so we're going to have to say, what's our revised estimate at the end of the project? What we're going to have to do is figure out, okay, we're going to have to spend extra money because we're going to have these people longer, or we're going to have to spend this money because we're going to have to get more cabling and nuts and bolts, right? And so it helps us in our resource estimation. In order to figure out how much extra budget you need, you're going to have to figure out exactly what more resources you need, and it's mostly labor. Can managing a small business help me become a project manager? Yes. And again, as I say, in your lifelong learning as a project manager, if you want to continue to grow, you're going to start at the tactical level, working with the team, and then you're going to be working more and more strategically as you progress and working more with the decision makers and the executives. The project manager sits between those two. And as you progress, you need to delegate a lot of the day to day work that you may like, but you need to delegate it. So you need to learn what you're going to be doing in the next 5 to 10 years. PMBOK is 8, not 7. 7 is good. 8 is really incredible. Let's see here. How to prepare. And we'll end up with this and then we'll take any last questions, okay? Real quickly, I teach this in all my PMP prep classes. Number one, you need to have some formal review of everything, right? So you have to have some stepwise review. Hopefully, it's led by an expert. Hi, I'm Tim. I'm an expert. Somebody like us. And what's nice about me is I'm not just an expert in this, but I was certified by Project Management Institute. I went through their formal training and I have their stamp of approval. And so I'm allowed to teach with PMI's training content through Simplilearn. Okay. So this is the level of expertise. If you really want to get the ins and outs, this, what you're getting today is like 5% of what you can get in a really good PMP prep. Okay. So you want to have that review. Number two, you want to go through the whole review and find as many good and valid practice questions. Because after that review, you want to find out what you're missing. You don't want to focus on the questions you're getting right. You want to focus on the questions you're getting wrong because that's where you're going to improve your score. And that's difficult. Find communities that actually talk this. There's many forums out there in public. I'm not going to mention any right now because I want to be a lurker because that's where I get a lot of my understanding about the community. But you know where in social media we talk about this, right? Now, here's the cool thing. Um, by limiting the defects, by using quality management, you're going to improve your score to about 80% correct on these practice questions. And that's about where you want to hit, right? It's too high for passing the exam for many reasons. Okay, but that's what you want. You want to have that level of confidence, right? At the same time, you have to think because this exam's really different. You have to think about time management. You have what? 180 questions and under 4 hours. You have about 1.3 minutes per question. The exam is structured to create that sense of urgency you have to have as a project manager. And then there's that focus. You need to be focused across those almost 4 hours, but our minds are not made for that. Our minds get distracted. So you have to work with this understanding that my mind's doing what it does and I just need to rein it in. And how do I rein it in? To keep that cadence on my exam going. Notice how I'm using my project management skills to prepare for the exam. And then finally, we have to also understand that it's only a small part of our life. Okay. It's just like exercise. You don't want to study 8 hours a day for 2 weeks. You want to study just like you do exercise, just like you get your nutrition. You want to do it for what, 30 to hour minutes to an hour a day, maybe 20 questions, and do this on a regular basis. And you find the questions you're getting wrong. You focus on those and focus the nuance. If you're working with Simplilearn, you get our recordings, you get the material, you get everything you need. Okay, and so this is what we're looking at. And again, you can do this on your own. You can do this with a group of people. It doesn't matter. But the key is you use your communication skills, you use your leadership skills, and you use all your project management skills to do this as effectively as possible. Now, let me talk about leadership because this is something that you'll find in yourself. You want to be a good leader? Learn to lead yourself first. Create that sense of self discipline because people don't follow people who say one thing and do another. Okay? It's called integrity, where your actions match your words. If you want people to follow you, you lead yourself. And when you're following yourself and your very best practice, people automatically follow you. Okay? This is what we call how to prepare. Now, we have time for just one or two more questions. If you have questions, um, boy, this has been a lightning round, hasn't it? I don't like to teach this way. And this is not teaching. This is just a very basic introduction. I would rather hear more from you guys. My best times is when I'm sitting in a classroom or I'm sitting in Zoom and interacting with people and engaging. And if you're a project manager and you enjoy that, you're going to be a great project manager. If you don't enjoy that engagement and that interaction, if you don't have that curiosity about this stuff, you'll be a good project manager. But it's the curiosity that keeps us going through the hard nights and the good nights and the hard days and the good days. It's that, huh, how does this work? How can I get better? And it's how we treat mistakes too. Remember that mistakes are not the end of the conversation. They're just the middle. You've learned something new. This is the key, especially when you lead people. We are prone as a civilization to say a mistake is bad, 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 bad. Right? No, a mistake doesn't have to be bad. The result of the mistake may be horrible, but the mistake itself, how do we actually make sure it doesn't happen again? And how can we communicate it so people can continue to trust us? This is, again, a part of leadership that we have to think. It's so much part of project management is mindset, and we have to be prepared for that. And with that, I'm done.
Thank you so much, Tim. I think this turned out to be a really, great segment. We didn't plan for this as part of the workshop, but it's amazing how it turned out. And thank you so much for taking the onus on that and answering as
My
many
pleasure.
questions as possible. I think easily about 40-50 questions we would have addressed in the last 20 minutes, which is great. And another great thing is that we have again like 50% of people who've shown interest in enrolling in the program, which is just amazing. So I'm going to end the poll. I have shared the results as well, so you know what we're talking about is really out there. So many of you have voted and shown interest in the program, which is just great. So yeah, and yes, we do keep our promises. So at the start of the session, we told you that there were free resources waiting for you, and here they are. The PM interview Q&A guide, the PMP exam in 5 weeks guide, and the PM portfolio playbook, all three yours to keep. And this is just for showing up today and being with us for the last few hours. So you can scan the QR code on screen right now, and you can download this all these guides straight to your device. This is a great bunch of resources if you're prepping for the PMP exam, or you're looking for PM project management jobs and are giving interviews already, or you want to build a strong portfolio for your career. So grab those before you close out of this window, close out of this webinar, because this is not going to be available post the session. Right. So can I move on to the next slide? Okay, no, I'll just keep it there in case people want to scan more. And I will launch a poll now to take your submissions for the certificate. Please give us your full name in this poll and submit it. We will be able to generate the certificate and share with you in the next 48 working hours. Considering today is a Saturday, please do give us time till Monday to get the certificate in your inbox. You don't have to give us your email ID or any other detail. Just the name that you want in the certificate is what we require you to submit here. So, yes. Okay, while the poll is live, I think I can move on to the next slide, guys. As anyone, does anyone need me to stay on the slide for scanning the QR code? Okay, I see a lot of thumbs up, so I'm moving on. Okay, so we have arrived at the end of the webinar and workshop, and it is right on time. So, to all the participants, thank you so much for spending the last 3 hours with us and being so engaging and appreciative and participating with us every step of the way. We hope that you'll be able to apply the learnings from this session as well as what you will get from our professional certificate program to get ahead in your career. Have a great day. Thank you. Tim, thank you so much for your guidance and sharing your
Oh,
knowledge. It's been an absolute pleasure hosting you. Do you have any final remarks to share? Any advice for our learners.
It's my pleasure to be here. I could not imagine having the soapbox that I have when I started my project management. And anything I can do to prepare you for the next 20 years is worth the effort. And this is what I'm going to be spending my last 2 decades on, making sure you guys have enough what you need to be confident and enjoy the ride.
Goosebumps, Tim. Thank you so much. With that, we're wrapping up the session. If anyone has any concerns or any question that we were not able to address, or even any feedback that you want to share, you want to suggest topics for the next workshops, please do feel free to write to us at webinars@simplilearn.net. We would love to hear from you and keep bringing you amazing content and amazing topics with amazing speakers like Tim. So. Good night, everyone. And for those of you joining us from the US, have a great day ahead. We will see you all soon in the next webinar.